I've been here. I'm an ordained priest within a movement for equality for the Roman Catholic Church. And we addressed some of the big questions that day about Catholic women's ordination. How is it possible? Why do we bother? And I pointed out that Catholicism is an identity that goes beyond dogma. And many of us don't want to become something other than Catholic. We want to experience our Catholicism as familial, as if rooted in our DNA, and we don't want to tear it out. We want to heal around the wounds, grow with our cultural wisdom, connect the stories of our tradition, and be part of a change that our community needs. And that stumps a lot of people. The question is always, why shouldn't I just go somewhere else where I could just be accepted? I know you all accept me, and I love you all, and I will come back again and again if you invite me. And the other question is, how can anyone be Catholic and not believe in all of the essential teachings of the Catholic Church? So I don't want to rehash those questions today, but I do want to share an observation that at the end of the talk, Dick Wolfsey came up to me, and it just delighted me, and it relates to my topic today. It's because he knows that Jews can believe many things, or not, and still be Jewish. So he recognized this glint of possibility that's not easy for a lot of people to see, that it might be possible in a religion like mine for Catholics to believe many different things and still be Catholic. So in modern Judaism, this is the norm. There are Orthodox Jews whose lives are fully anchored in the biblical practices of mitzvot, the commandments, and who obey precise laws around food, clothing, and allowed Saturday activities. And they believe God is God's direct word, and that is the only framework for understanding. There are also Reform Jews who are connected ancestrally and culturally to their biblical, familial, and religious heritage, but whose beliefs can range from atheism to deism, and who engage in biblical interpretation for the sake of story, inspiration, and connecting with their identity, and who may or may not adhere to mitzvot. They are who they are. So Reform Jews recognize all Jews as valid, including Jews of no religion. But many Orthodox Jews do not. They don't recognize all Jews as being Jews at all, even though they only make up about 9% of the American Jewish population. So it's certainly not traditional to think of Catholicism in this sense. Although why shouldn't we consider the possibility? Despite what people believe about the role of Roman patriarchy in defining our religion, we have cultural practices, calendars, prayers, and rituals that even non-believing Catholics participate in because it's our heritage, it's our story, it's our family, it's our people. And this is where jokes originate, that people are cafeteria Catholics or Christmas and Easter Christians. Even non-practicing Catholics share the language of tradition, of cultural fascination with saints, and probably have a rosary or two. They might even put it in their pocket for days where they feel they need extra help, even if they don't believe in God. I know people. Even if there's no way they're going to go to church or ever put faith in the Pope. So if Reform Catholics exist, and I say we do, we don't need the legitimacy of Rome to hold on to our identity. Just like Reform Jews don't depend on the approval of Israel's chief rabbinate. Yes, there are barriers to full inclusion, and specifically in certain places, and there are even serious problems. But identity runs deep, and there's no denying the essence of our being unless we want to. So who gets to tell the story of our identity? In a hierarchical model of humanity, people in power dictate authority for others, and that authority is largely accepted. Catholics and non-Catholics worldwide generally accept that the Pope in Rome is the foremost authority for all things Catholic. Even though a majority of U.S. Catholics support women's ordination, contraception, abortion access, same-sex marriage, and have a variety of ideas about God, everyone the world around believes that those are anti-Catholic stances because it's not what Rome teaches. So even non-Catholics will agree that Rome is the final authority because even if it doesn't reflect the beliefs of its people, because Rome says so. And it has said so for a very long time. Rome has the architecture, it has the archives, it has the men in fancy dresses, and it has the money. By contrast, modern rabbinic Judaism evolved in diaspora. It effectively decentralized the authority that had once existed around temple life. And because of the trauma of destruction and persecution, Jews have learned to exist as a people of shared cultural religious identity in environments across the globe that were often hostile to them. Their source of authority became folded into their family life, their community, and if they were fortunate to have one, their rabbi or shul. They kept their mitzvah, they studied Torah, and scholars commented on sacred texts together, debating everything. And Jews persist with a strong sense of identity, no matter what they believe, and various states of religiosity and cultural continuity, even without a centralized authority. Roman Catholicism, on the other hand, has been on the side of conquest and colonialism since its inception. To decentralize the authority of the Catholic hierarchy is to destabilize the Church's historical identity. It's not conjecture. There's a reason that liberation theologians of Central and South America of the 1970s were quelled through papal investigations and censure. They were empowering the populace over the palace. To some Catholics, challenging the centralized nature of our religious authority seems dangerous, reckless, or heretical. To others, it feels necessary for human liberation and to approximate a more honest faith, which I think is the process that you all engage in as you use to approximate a more honest humanity, a more honest community and faith. So if we don't have Rome, what do Reformed Catholics have? We have our traditions, our stories, our family history, our relationship to what we understand as the sacred, or God, or Christ. We have our church communities, our social justice teachings, and we have our life experiences. We also have our share of religious trauma and baggage that needs unpacking, and I'm not going there today. But from the time I was a child, Mass provided a place for quiet meditation, a place where I sat with my family and I held my mom's hand. She always rubbed it just like this. And I didn't have to talk about anything. I just experienced comfort and closeness. I was captivated by the sacred stories from the lectern, and I hung on the words of wisdom from our priest who knew how to tell a really good tale. By the time I could drive, if I had a problem, I would take it to Mass. Our liturgies for me measured time and they measured life. And there was a rhythm to the seasons. There was a time, as Scripture said, to weep and to laugh, to mourn and to dance, to search and to give up, to tear and to mend, to be silent and to speak. And those rhythms nurtured my soul. They gave me an anchor and they helped me grow. I never heard a time, though, about when ideas about life and God and religion should stay the same forever. I had wonderful priests who encouraged my curious, questioning mind, and the stories of Jesus just totally captivated me. There's at least one scientific reason these experiences were so vital to me. Developmentally, one of the things that science clearly shows is that talking, singing, and reading to babies and young children are critical components for a healthy future. Back and forth communication is where bonding happens. It's where language development happens, and infinite learning about oneself and one's orientation to the world. And it doesn't stop with childhood. Humans are wired for story, for making meaning out of our world, and for sharing our experiences with one another. Religion is just one way we do this. Many religions include rituals of song, of storytelling, reading, movement, and dance. They also incorporate symbols, art, objects, and artifacts to communicate meaning. It has been traditionally God-centered, but as UUs and Reformed Jews are examples of, we have communities who also gather religiously without requiring belief in God at all. Community is more profound than creed. So this brings us back to questions that to me are vital for our human cultural evolution. What is religion? Who is God to us, if God is to us? And why does it matter? If someone is only religious based on the narrow historical definition of a creedal belief in God or gods, then I'm probably a non-religious priest. And that's kind of wild, right? I'm not sure if lightning just flashed. And I'm not also sure that I'm a deeply religious non-believer like Einstein, quote that you had shared, because I certainly have my share of beliefs, but I just don't believe in sky god or white male god or any of the many mythic gods on the list that you had shared in your presentation deck. But I jive with Einstein when he writes, "If something is in me which can be called religious, then it's the unbounded admiration for the structure of the world so far as science can reveal it." Unbounded admiration. That's beautiful. Unbounded admiration is a kind of religious energy that could heal the world. In two words, Einstein hints at what researchers could have identified as 8 positive spiritual emotions that improve our quality of life. That's gratitude, equanimity, awe, wonder, forgiveness, compassion, and love. I have unbounded admiration for many things, including all forms of nature and much of human art and poetry, music, and other creative forms of expression. And as it relates to religion, I find myself deeply connected to the ebb and flow of the Catholic liturgies I grew up with. And I love the stories we tell. I also love the feel of my Graham's rosary between my fingers. And I've heard, read, and meditated on the Gospels so many times in my life that they're simply an encoded lens through which I view the world. There's no taking it out of me, it's in there. So I might be somebody that I use God language with ease, but I also recognize what we mean when we say God can be vastly different. If there are 3 people in a room, there's probably at least 7 different ideas about God, and that number is probably higher among UUs, and that makes you extra cool. But let's consider for a moment that God can grow up with us. For centuries, God has been statically defined, for at least most Christians, by people who didn't yet understand the earth rotated around the sun, what a germ was, how electricity worked, much less scientifically comprehend the complexities of human reproduction. The human understanding of God has always been in evolution, and now is no different. But our level of discourse and personal autonomy to discern and choose beliefs beyond the bounds of organized religion is unprecedented compared to centuries past. And I think the best we can do is appreciate ancient theology as poetry and a testament to the human spirit throughout time. We can relate to it, but we may also need to look at the treasures of the past and acknowledge that specific way of thinking was evolved for its time, but not ours. There are those like eco-theologian Joanna Macy who believe we're living right now through what's called a great turning. in which we are advancing in our human consciousness at the brink of a new era, breaking with patterns of harm and moving from a hyper-commercialized industrial growth society into a more sustainable civilization. I would love to believe she is right. In that, we are evolving from within our own social context and ready to collectively birth something new and something more unified as a global people and planet. So where might God be in that? I think we all have valid ways to answer that question. And so as for me, I believe in a life force at work in the universe that runs like a thread of connection between us. I believe in an energy we can tap into to find strength and healing and wisdom. And when I say I believe in God, it's not that I believe in a singular omnipotent entity that looks like Zeus on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, but that I believe in a spark of life-giving, nurturing, healing, creativity, and energy that surrounds us. I believe there is energy that we can tap into together with hope for a better world for ourselves and for our future generations. I also believe that can be hard to do when we're not feeling well, when we're disconnected from one another and from nature. So I believe in a God of evolution, not a one-and-done entity of the past. And I also believe I might share more in common with people who use atheistic language and say, I don't believe in God. But we might share a similar feeling about what threads us in the universe. It's language. What language am I comfortable with? So if we are made in God's image, as our scriptural myths suggest, it's because we're made of star stuff. And we have the opportunity to participate in co-creating the world to come, by the same impulse that propelled the universe into existence some 13.7 billion years ago. I mean, I'm totally down with Carl Sagan, who said, we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. So what if we, as conscious beings, are expressions of the universe, or the generative energy that we might call God, seeking to explore, to create, and to know itself? If God is self-expressing through us, self-learning, and evolving with us, then we might have a different takeaway on God's role in our lives. Rather than being the omnipotent, omniscient asshole who lets the planet and people suffer, perhaps we moan more of the story. We recognize that which we harness as people, capable of creation and destruction, and we choose more carefully that which we harness. So these are the thoughts of a heretical Catholic priest. But I'm not alone, and I did not create these ideas. I'm not the first Catholic to express such radical thoughts on God. In various ways, aspects of these ideas are expressed by Catholic theologians like Sister Elia Delio, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, Matthew Fox, Elizabeth Johnson, Richard Rohr, and so many more. So I'd like to just know, at this point, what do you think? Are we allowed to grow up ideas about God? Is it a conversation worth engaging? I think a lot of people think so. There are thousands of people who are in the process of deconstructing their Christianity in search of a form or belief of religion that makes sense for today. One of my favorites is Evolving Faith, which was inaugurated by the beautiful Sarah Held Evans, who was gone from this world way too soon, and Sarah Bessey. That group is composed a lot of post-evangelicals and reform-minded Catholics and other folks who are seeking to evolve their sense of a broad, inclusive religious community. And Catholics like me, we're liturgical people, so literally speaking, liturgy is the work of the people. It's the telling and retelling of our stories. It's illuminating meaning and the purpose in our lives. So when we practice our sacraments, we engage in rituals that connect us to our cultural identity and help us focus on that which is sacred in and around us. So whether we're attending Mass or participating in a baptism, wedding, confirmation, anointing of the sick, reconciliation, or ordination, we are present first and foremost to the stories that have shaped us. As you share stories in a different way, but they serve a similar function. It fosters community, connection, meaning-making, questioning, co-supporting, celebrating, mourning, uplifting, challenging one another, and with respect for diversity of thought. So you might be lifelong UU, or you might be here because you outgrew a space like Catholicism, Protestantism, Judaism, or other, but you value this reflective space with people who share your values. Together, I think we share a curiosity and depth of spirituality that transcends creed. So at this time, I would like to give you a few moments to just turn and talk to one another about anything that kind of hooked or caught your attention while I was speaking. Or just reflect on a question, what is it that brings you here as you? What do you think about God, or changing the definition of God? Can we do that? And what potentials or pitfalls do you see in these processes? So I'll have a seat. Just turn and chat. Yes, I'll come back. Yeah. I'll give you a couple minutes to chat and I'll come back. I give you about one more minute to talk amongst one another. Okay, hello. Lots of thoughts out there. I love this noise. It's kind of my favorite. But I would just like to give a chance if anybody would like to share a personal observation with everyone else or ask a question.
You're glorious. Thank you. What I'm intrigued with is, one of the things you said was that you were intrigued by the story of Jesus Christ. And you equivocate that story with the story of Adam and Eve. So can you be a Christian and not accept the fact that there was a resurrection, just like I can be a Jew and not believe in God?
I am very happy to take this question, and I will say that I did my master's thesis on on Genesis 1 through 3, and I basically taking apart the idea of original sin. I think it's bad theology. And I think that if we participate in evaluating our stories together, where they come from and how we make meaning from them, that we would see that original sin is a story that has been told that has had a lot of weight over time, and I think it has a lot of harm. And there are other ways to read that scripture. And so I would start with, I am Catholic. I do not believe in original sin. I don't think it's necessary. I think it is fundamental to our future and the future of humanity that we escape that narrative, because it tells people from the moment you are born, you are essentially wrong. You are always in need of an outside force to save you from your very essence of being, because there was a story in a garden and a woman, this is the story we tell, takes a piece of fruit and partakes of it, and is the downfall of man. So there's, for days I could go on about that. But, and then in terms of story and resurrection, where I take that, and I think, again, Judaism is a beautiful example, because when I attend IHC services, there is making meaning out of the story that exists without saying this is literally true. And there is a beauty to resurrection. There is a beauty and a reality that there are things that we experience in life that are deaths, that we experience resurrection from, the idea and the hope that this is not the end. Did that need to have a literal, does it need to come with a literal belief in the assumption of a body into a heaven, a literal space? I don't think so. That would make many Catholics very angry, but it's not going to make everybody angry. I would put out that there are a lot more people that haven't had the space to grow up through these ideas and embrace them differently. Yeah.
I'm reading you right. So you take the resurrection of Jesus Christ as a metaphor of something you can embrace in its meaning, but not its literal meaning.
Speaking for myself alone, yes.
Okay.
I can't speak for all. Yeah, I can't and won't speak for all RCWP. I can't speak for everybody in my church community. I can speak for myself that yes, I believe that this is a story that we have used because it's powerful, and it challenges power dynamics. If you look at the story of the gospel, and that's a thing for a whole nother day, I could take off with that, but there's a lot we can do with this if we see ourselves as protagonists in our own story and making meaning in the process, and that we're not fundamentally wrong and in need of saving just by existing. So I have big ideas, but what are your other thoughts you've been sharing or questions that you have? Any? Yeah, Amy.
So I shared with my small group that I'm more science-minded personally, and so evolution, I'm game in. But I've always thought of it as a dog-eat-dog, survival of the fittest, a very violent process, and it's what you illuminated. It's no, that's God into being. It's messy and it's complex and it's this, but I actually I'm like, it's a whole different meaning. Like, no, that's God becoming, and that's. So then if we are God, then it's now our torch to carry to, change the game, change the narrative. And so I'm like, it's not, it's messy and icky, but it's now a totally different framework. So thank you for that. I'm going to sit on that for a hot minute.
I love that, and I just go back to, you can go back to writings of Teilhard de Chardin. He wrote in the early 1900s, and he was a Catholic Jesuit priest who really evolved these ideas, at least within Catholicism. And so there's a very big vein of this kind of thinking. Sister Iliadilio is a brilliant modern Catholic theologian. And there have been a lot of Catholic theologians like this who are censured, whose books are the Vatican's do not read this will harm your soul. Go read the books. Mm-hmm. Read all the books. Yeah.
I'm wondering if the vocabulary that's been used throughout history is a stumbling block, and whether you can really evolve the word God into something more expansive like you have. Like if I had to fill out a survey and someone said, do you believe in God, and it was a yes or no, I'd have to say no. But in conversation, I would expand on that and say, well, here's what I do believe in, like you have. And the same thing with the word spiritual, which I think kind of carries some baggage. So the question is it easier to expand those words or come up with new words and new definitions? No.
You've got my husband's question back there. That's my husband, Jarrett, back in the corner. And I should let him speak for himself. I don't want to hold us in here too long. Hopefully we can keep our conversation going out there. But I think that that's a question we have to answer. Because for some people, that just naming God or using God's name, invoking God, it invokes spiritual harm. There have been people who have been very deeply hurt. And so to be mindful of, but I also kind of equate it that, the LGBTQ plus community has been able to resurrect the word queer and identifying queer as like we are proudly queer, and that is okay, and you can't take this from us, it's not a bad word. But how can we get there with God? I would like to try. I was like, that's my voice in this is I would like to try, but I also respect, he's like, I don't dig the word. I don't want to use the word. And that's cool. Like, I'm not going to make him, but we talk about what we mean in that context. So, all right, last one. Thank you.
Last one. And I'll just say it again, and I think most of you know what I'm going to say.
Should we recite it with you?
Yes, you should. What is God?
Goodness on down.
Thank you all very, very much. It's God continued to resonate with me.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful end. Thank you very, very, very much.